Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about birds and pests, both the damages that they can cause to your roof and different solutions to prevent and deter them from causing any damages. Before we get started, I will introduce our team quickly. So my name is Kelly McDonald. I will be your host for today. We also have two of our account managers with us, Michelle Wallace and Andrew Tate. And then we also have a special guest joining us from our head office in British Columbia, one of our senior estimators, Duncan Campbell. So he is an absolute expert when it comes to this kind of stuff, and will be available at the end of the presentation during our Q&A portion for any questions that you may have. So not only does he have a lot of experience with these various systems that we're going to be looking at, but he actually has a bird deterrent system where he lives as well. So he can give you some real life experience with the system that he has in place. So yes, as mentioned at the end of the presentation, there will be a Q&A portion. It is open forum, so anything you want to ask, feel free to do that at that time. If there are any questions that come up and you don't want to forget about them throughout the presentation, feel free to pose them in the chat and we will address them at the end. All right, so let's get started here. So for starters, why are birds and pests such a problem? Aside from being an annoyance to residents and yourself as property managers, they can also cause a lot of damage to the roof and to the exterior of the building, as well as a number of health and safety hazards. When it comes to finding a home, these animals do not discriminate, so it doesn't matter what type of property you manage. This can affect townhouses, detached houses, low-rise and high-rise condos, commercial facilities, all of the above. So for starters, looking at pests, especially as the temperatures start to cool, these guys are going to be looking for somewhere nice and warm to live, and an attic space is absolutely perfect for them in their eyes, not ours. So commonly we are seeing squirrels and raccoons are the major offenders in this case. So especially when it comes to residential buildings, if there's any sort of openings, either in the vents or the soffitting, the metal fascia, any sort of existing opening will allow them to enter into the attic space or into the interior. This can also be an issue if there's any missing vent caps or other type of hardware. Basically, any opening that's created can allow an entry point for them. In some cases, like down here where we have a plastic vent on the roof, this is also quite easy for them to break away at, and then they can infest through there as well. If you are having any sort of persistent infestation issues at a complex that you manage, it is something that we would want to look into potential solutions. One of the most common ones that we would look at if there were plastic vents throughout would be replacing them with metal vents, because as you can see with our unimpressed friend up here, that is something that they're not easily going to be able to break through. With birds, again, they will try to find a home and create a nest wherever possible. This can cause an issue for a number of reasons. One of them is because the nest itself can create either blockages if they're doing it in the gutter and eaves troughs. It also can create a fire hazard depending on where it is that their nests are situated. When it comes to bird droppings, they are extremely hazardous because they can carry a number of diseases and it's very acidic. So not only can this cause health and safety concerns, but the acidic droppings can also damage the roof membrane and break it down, and then you just wouldn't have a system that's going to last as long as it potentially could. Some birds, such as woodpeckers, most often will actually chip away at the side of the exterior. So in this case here, we have a stucco exterior that a woodpecker has chipped away at, creating quite a substantial opening. So just a very important note about dealing with any sort of bird droppings. When it comes to removing these and cleaning them, extensive care and additional resources are required. This is not something where you would want to just send a super up on the roof unprotected to remove this, because it can again, be highly acidic, and they can carry various diseases. So extensive PPE is required when removing any sort of extensive bird droppings. In that case, we would be looking at protective suits and booties, gloves, and not just like a regular mask or face covering that we're of course very used to right now, but a respirator mask. Additionally, any tools that are used during the removal, we would want to have cleaned and sanitized after the fact, before they're touched with bare hands or before they're used again. So yeah, just very important note about that. Also, when it comes to bird droppings, I know that of course they're unsightly, but you may think, oh, well, it's up on the roof and nobody goes up there, so it's not a major concern. One thing to consider is, especially if there's a large buildup around an air intake unit, that can actually be coming into the building and negatively affecting residents inside, even though you can't see it and it's just something on the roof. So again, some of the issues that are caused by birds and pests are, of course, damages to the roof and the building exterior. As you can see on this shingled roof here, we have a large concentration of droppings that are severely deteriorating the shingles there. And again, more woodpecker holes in a stucco exterior. Additional problems can include interior infestation. Any openings that are created by animals can not only lead to infestation, but they can lead to interior leak issues as well. Health hazards from the acidic bird droppings, as well as safety hazards from the birds themselves. I know Andy was making a joke there about the movie The Birds, but we have actually seen it before where we were installing some bird netting. The guys had to be wearing protective equipment as well, because a falcon was actually trying to dive bomb them on the roof. And then of course, any problems with birds and pests will be an annoyance for residents and property managers alike. So one of the best ways to get ahead of this is through regular inspections. This is going to identify any openings like some of the ones you see here, missing vent cap, opening in the soffits, opening in the fascia where we have a little friend living inside here. It's going to help identify any areas that can potentially lead to interior infestation or leaks. In these cases as well, if you're doing inspections on a high-rise roof and you see a large concentration of bird droppings, it might help identify a bird issue that you might not have known that you even had. So more thorough list of solutions and prevention. Again, the regular inspections just to ensure that there aren't any openings present. If there are, having those sealed and dealt with, whether it be replacing existing soffits and vents or refastening. One of the main things that we do look at, again, is replacing any plastic roof vents with metal vents. If there was a case where there was an infestation in an attic or any other interior space, that would require pest control to come and safely remove the animal from inside the space. Anytime that is required, we will work with pest control so that we can make sure that there's not too much time between when they're coming in to remove the animal and when we would be doing any repairs to the exterior to seal anything up and make sure that additional infestation is not going to occur. By doing an inspection, we can also determine a bird deterrent system that is going to work for your building and the specific issues that are occurring. So when it comes to bird deterrent systems, there are a ton of different options out there. And even with the specific types like we have here, there are a vast variety within those larger types. So some of the most common ones that we see and that we're going to be looking at today are bird spikes, bird nets, sonar or sound systems, decoys, electric tracks, and spiders. So how do you know which system is going to be right for your building? There's not a one-size-fits-all solution to a bird deterrent system. Again, an inspection would be required to determine exactly what it is that's going on, what type of birds are an issue, and determine what's going to work best. There are many cases where trial and error may be required. You might install a system and then the birds aren't aren't really reacting to it in any way. They're still landing, nesting, causing damages. So you may need to try something else. There are some cases too where you're going to have the best effect with two systems working together. All right, so bird spikes. Bird spikes are typically installed along the edge of a building or along a gutter system, and they're going to help prevent birds from landing and perching in unwanted areas. These can be installed either with an adhesive or with fasteners. The only thing is anything that is going to require fasteners, you just want to make sure that any sealants are being applied and kept up with over time, because that can potentially cause a leak issue down the line if it is unattended. So some of the pros of the spike system is that it's easy to install and relatively low maintenance. Cons is that depending on where it's installed and what type of building you have, it could potentially create a visual eyesore for the residents, and it may not help to deter smaller birds. With the bird netting, this is going to help to block from landing on any roof surfaces or entering into any enclosed or partially enclosed areas of the roof or otherwise. They're also commonly installed on balconies to prevent birds from coming and landing. The nice thing about netting systems is that they're very versatile. There's so many different options out there. They can be installed horizontally, vertically. There's different net strengths. You can have them customized. You can have zippers installed. So that if it is in an enclosed space where you still need to have people entering, whether it's for HVAC maintenance or whatever may be in the area where the enclosure is, there are zippers that can be installed so that you can still be accessing them without having to remove the netting entirely. So because of all the options here and the fact that it is customizable, that is a large pro for this system, also fairly easy to install. One of the cons is that it can be a more expensive option, especially if you are looking into a customized option. And again, because fasteners are required in most cases to install the netting, again, that's just something that you want to watch out for because it could create interior water ingress issues. So next we have the electric track. So this is installed along the roof's edge, and if a bird tries to land on it, it does send a small shock just to try and condition them to stop landing there and to go on to somewhere else. Now this is something that it is an electrical component, so it would require an electrician to come in, and we would have to work alongside them for them to properly connect this. As far as the track itself, fairly easy to install, but it does require that electrical component, which is something to consider. Anything that we're installing that does require an electrical component would require some more extensive maintenance than some of the other systems. So those ones can be a bit of a con for this system. One of the biggest pros is that I'd say out of all the systems, it's definitely the lowest profile. So that can be appealing for residents because it's not going to cause any sort of visual distraction. So the sonar or sound systems, again, this is something that requires an electrical component. And what it does is it imitates the noise of a bird's predator to scare them away from a particular building. Typically, the units that are installed are weatherproof, but you still would want to keep them in an area that is protected, just so no damages occur. One of the nice things about these systems is that you can typically have it connected to Wi-Fi so that somebody can have it on their phone and can adjust it as needed. Some other pros are the fact that the sound can be changed on them in the event that the birds start to adapt or for whatever reason that you would want to change the sound on them. They can deter a vast number of birds and pests, and it does cover a very large area. One of the downsides, again, with the electrical component, it's just an additional factor that's required for the installation. So it makes it a bit longer, a bit more costly. And then it does require a fair bit of more maintenance throughout its lifespan. Another issue is that the noise can be disruptive, but depending on what times it's going off, if it's going off throughout the night, and depending on which direction it's facing. So next we have the spider. This is somewhat similar to the bird spikes in the sense that it's going to help prevent any birds from landing and nesting in a particular area. This would be better suited for a more localized area as opposed to atop the metal flashing running along the edge of the building. One nice thing is that it is very easy to install, and it is designed to move with the wind, so it can stand up to high winds. You're not going to have the arms of it breaking off if there's any high winds occurring. One of the downsides is that it's not always the most effective, and there's no rhyme or reason for that. It's just from what we've seen, sometimes it just doesn't work very well. And part of that could be because the birds can adapt to it over time, or kind of outsmart the system and figure out a way that they can land and drop anything for their nest and build a nest kind of between where the spider arms are reaching out and trying to deter them from landing. So the last one we're going to look at is decoys. I'm not sure if anyone heard at the beginning, Duncan was mentioning decoys and how effective they can be. So they are emulating the visual appearance of a bird's predator, and they come in a wide variety of options as for the actual look of the decoy. They're very easy to install and highly effective for deterring different birds. Some of the cons can be that the birds could get used to them over time, and depending on where they're being installed, they could potentially create an eyesore. One very important thing to note with any bird deterrent system that you would be using or installing at your building, some are definitely higher maintenance than others, some are lower, but in order to maximize the lifespan of the system, some maintenance is going to be required on any one that you do choose. Also just inspections to make sure that any wear or tear is being addressed, so that you can get the longest lifespan out of the system as possible. And so just, excuse me, an overview of everything that we just looked at. Again, any unattended bird and pest issues can cause not only damage to the exterior of the building and the roof, but can also cause health and safety concerns for residents. Completing regular inspections is the best way to help minimize any openings or any issues that could lead to pest infiltration, or help identify any potential bird issues that you may not know about, and stop damages before they occur. And when it comes to the various bird deterrent systems, again, not one size fits all. You would need to look at the system that is going to work best for your building, the birds that are causing an issue, and the particular issues that they are causing. All right, so now we are going to do our Q&A. So I'm going to have Duncan, if you can unmute yourself. And then if anybody has any questions about what we've talked about or any particular issues that you may be having.
I have several units that have unsightly netting that they're not supposed to have. I've got at least three residents that feed the pigeons, even though we've asked several times to not do it. So they land on the roof, they land on several balconies, and they're always around the property.
One of the things with birds is you got to make your building the least appealing of all the buildings around you, because virtually in most cases you're transferring them to be somebody else's problem because they're just going away. Like you say, by feeding them, that's the biggest magnet of the bunch. It's like Kelly indicated earlier, most buildings, it would be a site visit to start to look at the situation and see if there's an overall plan that we could come up with. Like you say, is there something better than netting on every deck, or is there, you know, if things are attractive, if there's a lot of protected areas that are, like Chid mentioned earlier, underneath air units and comfortable spots that are away from the breeze and the wind, they go there. The trick is, like I say, is to make your building less appealing than your buildings around it and have enough deterrents. And sometimes it takes one or two items only, and sometimes it takes a little more than that. Hopefully the netting is not something that would need to stay forever, but if we could come up with some solutions to make their life a little more irritating, they likely move on.
We can set up an inspection of the building, Melinda, and see if we can give some options and recommendations since we take a look at it.
Well, the first thing I have to do is to get people to stop feeding them.
That's a big part of it. And the problem becomes once they're comfortable at your building, then you have the next problem is getting them to leave because they might find some other roosting areas because it's nearby where their food source is.
Right.
Anybody else having any bird problems at their buildings?
I was mentioning earlier in the building that I live in, and I'm the strata president in the building I live in, and we had woodpeckers that were pecking holes in the stucco on the outside of the building and became quite a problem over a number of years. So we had to, we've tried to find deterrents. We had some noise makers that would do music or bird sounds. And we tried to be creative with that. A lot of maintenance required for changing the bird noises. Eventually the neighbors complained because the timing on it would be a little later or too early in the morning. So we eventually went to the beach balls with the faces on it and streamers, and it seems to be the most effective. The only problem is tenants taking them off because they don't like the beach ball looking on the building, but it was the most effective for getting rid of woodpeckers in our situation. We did end up sealing all the holes in the building as well.
Yeah, they cause a lot of damage.
Oh yeah, we had about 30 or 40 holes in the building from woodpeckers.
So Dana just asked in the chat, what about squirrels? Dana, I apologize. I think you joined a few minutes after we were talking about that. So when it comes to pests such as squirrels or raccoons, the main thing there is identifying if there are any existing openings that can allow them to get in and cause an interior infestation, and sealing those up, working with pest control to make sure that any animals in a building are removed, and then sealing any openings that are there. And then if there's any particular issue that you're having, we can always take a look at that and see a solution that's going to work for your building.
Because squirrels they seem to like to chew on wires inside attics. I've quite often seen wires that are damaged, and I've in fact seen a squirrel body that ended his life by chewing through a wire in an attic. So they can do a lot of destructive damage.
If anybody wants to book a assessment to deal with some pest issues, we'll be doing a draw next Friday for a $100 gift card for anybody that books an assessment. And you can book an assessment by just emailing service@detailroof.ca or if myself at michelle@detailroof.ca.
Yeah, I'll also be sending an email out to everybody. So if you don't have a pen or your keyboard handy to write down anything right now, I will be sending an email with some information. And then you can email us there if you have any buildings that you want us to take a look at.
Kelly will also include a link to our YouTube channel, and that's where the full recording of this will be posted as well, in case you missed a few minutes of it, and all of our other webinars are up there.
There's another question there from Mariana. Squirrels get into chimneys and raise their babies there. Any mesh to be installed on top/roof?
Duncan, would you recommend putting mesh on the chimney?
It would depend on the situation, the style of the chimney and that kind of thing. But for the most part, you could put some kind of system around it depending on the details of the roof area. Like a lot of old chimneys and buildings are not used anymore. So, you know, you just got to be aware if it's heat rated and everything else, you just want to make sure you're far enough away from, you're not interfering with something that's going to cause a concern. Whatever product you're using would match the situation.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
Yes, thank you, everyone.